Hi again then guys, and welcome to another Forza Motorsport 7 specific vehicle review, and this time in a similar way to the Mercedes racing truck which we reviewed yesterday. This is another one of those more oddball vehicles. Certainly not your typical choice of lap record holder or potential race winner, but as is often the case with cars which aren't as obvious a choice, it does have some use, at least for me personally, and I know for some other people as well. And it pretty much goes without saying that in a similar way to the tank pool racing truck or various other vehicles on other games as well, it isn't going to be for everyone. This car definitely won't be for everyone. Some people will love it just for the oddball factor, some people just for the fun factor, some will potentially like trying to get good performance out of it. I'm more so in that camp. And some people just won't care. Now, this car, the Cadillac XTS Limo, is a vehicle which you can win on Forza 7 in the career mode, if you will, the campaign mode. And you can win it very early on. If memory serves, I think it's actually the first tier of racing that you can win this in. If I remember correctly, the bowling event with this car, I think it was. Now, the price on this car, or the quoted price, is just over 48 grand. That's not that high, especially for a newer Cadillac. I would have personally assumed it would be more than that, especially given the price of, say, the Escalade, some of the other CTS-V models. I would have thought it would be more, maybe even 100 grand or 90. But no, not that it really makes a huge difference, because as far as I'm aware, you can't buy it anyway. You can see the price in the car collection screen, but at the same time, it's not actually in the official car dealership, and there are a number of vehicles like that on the game, cars which you can only unlock instead of buying. And this, I would say, is a vehicle which is worth trying to win, because at the end of the day it's not difficult to win. You don't even have to race against the computer technically, so you might as well do it. Even if you end up putting it in the auction house or never using it again, no real harm comes from winning it. So if you do win it, what do you get from the car? Because being a limo, there are certain things that you would assume about the car, and some of those assumptions might turn out to be true, but others perhaps not. So what's the actual spec? Well, it's E-Class, so it's pretty low, but that's not too surprising. 276 PI. You're looking at 304 horsepower, because of course this isn't a V model. It's an XTS, but it's not an XTS V. Kind of unfortunately, 550 horsepower or more as standard would have been pretty cool in this thing, but of course a limo doesn't need that. 304 horsepower, 264 pound-feet of torque, and the most interesting thing that I found about this car, when I was noting down the specs in the game at least, is the weight. It's no way near as heavy as I would have expected it to be, given the fact that a normal Cadillac, even a sport model, weighs, what, 1700 kilos-ish, maybe a little bit more sometimes. I would have thought that this would weigh over 3 tons easily, especially given the Escalade is nowhere near the size of this thing and weighs, well over 2 tons. This car weighs 2.5 tons. In fact, it's just under 2495 kilos is, I think, really impressive for this limo. Now, on a totally separate side point, regarding the length of the car and the style, I don't like one thing in particular about this limo, and it's really the only thing, to be honest, that I don't like about it, and that is what they did visually when they stretched the wheelbase. Because as far as I know, this is an official Cadillac model. It's not done by another company, as I said, at least as far as I know. Now, with that being said, you would assume that when a company themselves makes a limo version of their car, as many companies do, Jaguar, Mercedes, Rolls-Royce, that you would think that they would design it in such a way that it visually still looks good, or as good, at least, as the normal sedan. In the case of this one, and maybe this is just me, but I would have thought other people would have noticed this as well, the window line on this limo, and you can see it here in the video, I think it looks hideous, because the window line is so obviously designed for a short wheelbase vehicle and then just literally stretched, almost like it was stretched in Photoshop rather than actually designed to be changed into a limo, that the shape of the window line looks so strange, like somebody's just stretched the car rather than actually redesigning the window line to suit being a limo. Now, of course, that doesn't really affect its performance. It's just something which bugs me about the car, because I like Cadillac. I'm a huge Cadillac fan of their cars, both old and new, And I expect more from them when it comes to something like that. They, of course, do have a long history of making limos. So I would have expected more in that regard. But be that as it may, on a more important note, what can it actually do in terms of performance? Handling in particular though, because it's not that quick, let's be honest. You probably wouldn't expect it to be. With 300 horsepower and a 2.5 ton limo, of course it's not that quick. But you can always do engine swaps. I mean, even on Forza 6 this thing could do over 220 miles per hour when tuned, so performance isn't really an issue in a straight line. It might just take a bit longer to get there. Around corners though, that's where the potential issue could arise, because even though it only weighs 2.5 tons, it could run into that same problem that I've talked about with a number of cars, not just limos but others as well in the past. This is a problem which even something like a Nissan GTR can run into, in particular an R35, and that is, a car doesn't need to be overly heavy to be cumbersome around a track. A car that's extremely light but that's still very physically large, say something the size of a limo, but it weighs, say, 500 kilos, if that were possible, it would still be very awkward to use. Because even though the weight isn't there, the sheer size and awkwardness of the vehicle still would be, and that, to some degree, is carried over in a limo, or at least you'd expect it to be. In the case of this Caddy, I think the handling is actually surprisingly good. It's a really fun car first and foremost. You can actually drift it pretty well in a similar way to the Mercedes truck. It actually makes a pretty nice oddball drifter, and this is the exact kind of thing that I would certainly drift. But the handling has definite track potential. This is the kind of vehicle which I wouldn't necessarily use all the time, and I certainly wouldn't recommend that people would try to use it all the time, especially not online, because there are definitely quicker cars in its classes. But if you do fancy trying an alternative, certainly an oddball one, say strip it out, lower it, put a roll cage in there, and you've got yourself something of a potential track car. Is it going to beat everything it comes up against? No, of course not. But it's easy to win, it's fun, it looks like nothing else in the game, so you might as well give it a go. But that's it for this pick overall. I'll see you guys next time, and as always, thanks for watching.